Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
We're going to do our most impressive and disappointing players that we've seen so far this year. So, how about you give me all three of yours just to start off, and then afterwards I'll give you mine. So who are your impressive players?
All right. Mine are Alejandro Villanueva. First, he's come a long way from where he was at this point last season. He developed into one of the best blindside protectors of the game in the game at this moment, in my mind. Other than a couple plays against Myles Garrett in Week 1, I think Villanueva has been very good in pass protection and has been solid, not spectacular as a run blocker. The impressive start we've seen this year is the opposite of what we've seen the last few years, where he got off to a slow start out of the gate. John Bostic is my other impressive winner, if you will. I think he's been the most consistent defender all year long, and he's about as rock solid as they come. And considering where he was coming into the preseason, we weren't even sure he was going to be playing that much, and here we are right now. He's one of the best that we've had. And last is Ryan Switzer. And other than a few questionable decisions he's made as a returner, he's been a home run transaction for the Steelers. The return game has finally become a threat on both the punting and kicking games, which is honestly the first time we can probably say that since like 2004 or something like that. Way back like at the start of the Ben Roethlisberger era. We haven't seen much of it from both ends in a long time. Switzer's also added a nice element as an occasional slot receiver on the offense as well, and even has played in the backfield too. I think this trade has paid off big time for the Steelers. Who are your winners or impressive players through this point of the season?
The first one is Juju Smith-Schuster. All you heard coming into the season was how he was having a bad camp, how he was set for a sophomore slump with how he doesn't pay attention to football enough. He has such a childish mentality, etc. And well, he took those criticisms and decided to be the Steelers' leading receiver in terms of yards and receptions to this point. I feel like in his second year, he's just continued to step forward, and unfortunately for opposing defenses, they can't double cover both him and Antonio Brown. So I'm very happy with Juju Smith-Schuster. My second guy that impressed me was L.J. Fort. We only got to see one real game of his, but it was such a spectacular gameplay from him that I'm not even sure the Steelers coaches expected. Obviously, last year we talked about it. They opted to bring in Sean Spence to start in Waco Shazier's injury, but I feel like Fort might get some snaps when he returns from his injury following this huge performance that he had. But and then my third one is James Conner. I wasn't expecting a bad year from him, so to say. I was expecting a good rusher with meh hands and like bad pass protection. And what we got has been a great rusher with fantastic hands in terms of pass catching and good pass protecting abilities. And it's like it came out of nowhere. He took all the things he struggled in the limited snaps we saw him last year and worked to improve it, and it paid off. It's been very impressive for him without a doubt. Conversely, who has disappointed you so far or been a loser?
For me, it's the guy that's disappointed everybody, and it's Artie Burns. He has to be one of the worst defenders in the league this year, in a season where practically nobody is playing good defense, and that's not good. It's a shame, too. His confidence is way down, and he has played well at times, and he's shown good technique, but then it'll all blow up in his face, too. It has absolutely been an ugly season for Burns. Also been ugly for Chris Boswell. As we mentioned, already more missed kicks this year than all of last season. It hasn't been good, and I'm pretty disappointed in him. And then Vince Williams is last just because he hasn't been the disruptive force we saw most of last season and only has one sack and is on pace for just 2 or 3 this year after having 8 last year. So it's been a disappointing season for him as well. What about you? Who disappointed you to this point of the season?
I really wanted to find one on offense, but I couldn't. Like, the only guy that was marginal was Ben Roethlisberger, but like, even in terms of how he started last year, I wasn't disappointed with how he's done this year. So all my losers are actually defensive players, and that starts with Cameron Hayward. He really just isn't living up to the guy he was last year, and I'll really leave it at that so I don't beat the dead horse, because I've said it, I think, in the past 3 podcasts like 5 times now. Moving on to my second one is Cameron Sutton. I want him to play more, and I don't really know why he doesn't. Can he really be that much worse than Artie Burns and or Cody Sensabaugh? And that brings me to my third and last loser, and that's Stephon Tuitt. It was almost hard for me to find my third loser, so I'm not going to beat the dead horse. Even after Tuitt's big game last week, he needs to continue to show me more to get off the disappointed list in my look, because one good week is not going to erase the other 5 that I saw. So he still has some more work to do. But after looking at the players, we actually have to take a look at the coaches, starting with offensive coach Randy Fichtner. How do you grade him?
I'm giving Randy Fichtner a B because, we've seen fantastic red zone play from the Steelers up until this past game, and we've seen the offense has really been better on third down too at times, but at the same point, this grade has dropped down because of Randy Fichtner's struggles to commit to the running game in certain games this year, and because of the slow starts we saw up until the Falcons game. Those slow starts killed the Steelers, and I think we've seen better starts lately, but even the Bengals game wasn't a great start either. Those are really important. How you open up a game can really set you up for success or failure, and that's the biggest place I want to see Fichtner improve, but I don't think he's been bad either, so I gave him a B.
I'm going to give him a B as well. There have been some questionable blitzy calls, and the offense has gotten off to a lot of slow starts. But other than that, I'm happy with Randy. I give him a B. Also, the offense isn't very heavily penalized this year, so I give him a hand for that, because the other units are all heavily penalized. But moving on to defense, Keith Butler has been questionable so far this year. A little bit, at least I'm a little bit wishy-washy on where to grade him, but what do you give him?
The things Keith Butler has done well are the things we typically expect him to do. A couple weeks ago, this would have been like a D, but with the way the defense has played the past 2 games and the fact that we've seen less communication breakdowns than what we've become accustomed to seeing, I gave him a B- because I feel like he's trending in the right direction. But, I mean, it's got to keep going.
I'm going to give him a B- as well. The beginning wasn't good, but it's getting better, and that's something to be happy about. The defense has now stood up pretty well against both the Falcons and Bengals' opponent offenses, meaning Butler is trending upwards, so I'm going to give him a B-. Moving on to Danny Smith. What do you grade him?
I give Danny Smith a B+, and mostly because I feel like the coachable aspects of special teams have been really good, with the exception of a few things. The return games, the coverage teams have all been pretty good. The struggles on special teams have come mostly with individual players, which is not as much to do with coaching as it is just the individual player not being good enough. The one issue I do have with Danny Smith comes back to penalties, and some of them, especially like the Stephen Ridley one, in the Chiefs game where he lined up incorrectly, that's one that can't happen at all. So the penalties are the big reason that brings it down, but they've come close to blocking several punts, and they did block one, and the coverage and return units have been good. But it's still a flawed unit, to be sure. So I went with the B+ for Danny Smith.
So, as you mentioned, a lot of penalties have come from this unit. It is this Steelers special team is the most penalized special teams unit in the NFL, but apart from the last game, the special teams coverage teams were some of the best we've seen this year. Also, I imagine he played a big role in getting Ryan Switzer, so I'm going to count that as a win for him as well. However, it still bothers me what he considers elite in terms of punting and his decision to roll with Berry at the end of the day. So I'm going to give him a B-. But I'm just going to give him a B-. Moving on to Mike Tomlin. What do you grade him?
I feel like Tomlin has had an okay season. He's really struggled in some areas, and he's done really well in some areas. I guess to sum it up, a slow start with the frustrating penalties is annoying, but he's had the team rally around him, and they've played much better than I ever thought they were going to at certain points this season. And they've won some games I didn't think they were going to win. So I'll give him a B for what he has done the last few weeks.
I'm going to give him a B as well. He still has to get this team more disciplined when it comes to penalties. But other than that, I've been happy with what he's done, so I'm going to give him a B. So now we're going to wrap it up by by putting this all together and giving our overall grades for the offense, defense, and special teams. So for offense, what final grade did you give them?
I'm actually just going to go with all three of them. With the offense, I gave them a B+. Look, they've done a pretty good job all season as far as scoring and moving the football. They've done good in the red zone, but I still want to see more of a commitment to the running game, and there are still some aspects of the offense that need to improve, like a deep threat, but we're getting there. We are getting there, so I was happy with it. A B+ is a sufficient grade in my opinion. The defense really struggled early on, but the last couple weeks they have improved, and because they're trending in the right direction, they seem to be figuring some things out. I went with the C+. And then special teams, the struggles of Chris Boswell and the other specialists as far as Jordan Berry and Cameron Kennedy bring this grade down to a C. But the improved play of the coverage teams and the return teams bump it up to a C+ in my mind. What about you? Oh, sorry, I should say that leads to a final grade of a B- for me. What about you?
Well, for offense, I gave them a B+ altogether. Roughly, when I basically went back and did a little bit of math and tried to see, okay, what did I give every player? My math was a little bit off because, I counted guys I counted Matt Filer as a whole being and just kind of counted that towards the thing. When in reality, he's not a contributor. He's not a guy that's always there. So overall, when I went back and changed everything, I gave the offense a B+. I felt like they've done pretty solid this year. I think that they have a lot of upside going forward, but that's just me. For the defense, did the same math and stuff. I came to around a C+ with my own factoring my own thoughts into it. I feel like they've overall been okay at the end of the day. I mean, they improved. If they hadn't improved since those Tampa Bay games and the game against the Chiefs, I was going to be this would have been a lower grade, but they're getting better. Still a lot of penalties, though, also going on with that unit. Special teams, I give a C-. The penalties have been killer. Barry's been inconsistent. And obviously, I didn't rank Boswell very high. So I'm going to have them at a C- right now. But I hope to see more things coming forward. They're going to be a much higher unit if Boswell gets back on track. Boswell weighs heavily down on this. And also, Barry's a big contributor. But so C- for them. And that leaves my final team grade for the first half to be a B. I felt like the offense has been so strong that even though that a B+, a C+, and a C-, averages more out to a C+ or a B-, I felt like the offense has just been a high B+, that it brings the overall grade to a B. That's how I feel about the team. So, yeah.
All right. Last section before we wrap up part one of this two-part episode, a very long one for sure, is the team awards. And we'll start with the MVP of the Steelers to this point. I went with James Conner. He's been the do-it-all guy, and he's been valuable as a pass protector, a pass receiver, and a running back, like a straight rushing running back. So James Conner is my MVP for the Steelers.
Oh, yes. He leads the team with 7 rushing touchdowns. He's on pace for a very, very good, 16 touchdowns. James Conner's got to be the MVP right now.
Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going with Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he's been the most consistent offensive performer, and outside of his touchdowns and his occasional drops, I think he's been fantastic. So he's my Offensive Player of the Year.
If it couldn't be James Conner, I'm going to roll with AB84, and that's solely because of his 6 touchdowns. That's a lot of points that he's putting up. I was between Juju and AB, but the touchdowns put it over for me.
Defensive Player of the Year, I went with John Bostic. He's not the most outstanding player on defense, but his consistency has been key for me. So John Bostic is my Defensive Player of the Year. What about you? Or rather, Defensive Player up to this point. What about you?
I went for Joe Hayden. I felt like he's been one of the most consistent players they've had when he's on the field. He got injured, and you saw what it was like without him. So I'm going to roll with Joe Hayden right now.
The best unit we've seen this year, and I know we both agree on this one, but I'll say it, tight ends. All three of them have stood out in positive lights, so I've been very pleased with them.
I'm going to agree with you. I think the tight ends have been the most surprising and best unit so far we've had this year, so I'm going to give them the unit of the year.
Rookie of the year, I'm going with Terrell Edmonds, and it's not even close. He's the only guy that's contributed really at all in any facet this year. Even with some of his struggles, he's had a lot on his plate, and I think he's been fantastic, all things considered, given the fact that he's played the second most snaps going into this past week. So I am giving him the Rookie of the Year basically by default.
I actually don't really have a Rookie of the Year because I really I don't feel great about Terrell Edmonds yet. I mean, if I had to pick, I'd actually probably give it to Chuck Okorafor because I felt good when he's on the field, like basically the whole time he's been on the field. He just hasn't played, but that's because he hasn't played a lot. I'm sure if he got actual snaps, I wouldn't. But right now, I'm just I didn't feel like Edmonds has earned it yet because of how he started. But he's trending upwards. I'm sure by the end of the year I'll feel a bit differently. But right now, I either don't have a pick or it had to be forced to pick Chuck Okorafor.
Comeback Player of the Year. Who has impacted this year that didn't last year?
Really, it's just Vance McDonald. Vance McDonald, it's just incredible. We thought he was going to be another Ladarius Green for the most part. It felt like that because he kept getting injured and stuff, but he's come on this year and just been amazing. Who do you have?
I also have McDonald. He's just been outstanding, and he's added a different dynamic to this team on offense. Specialist of the year is Ryan Switzer. He's been good, and I don't see how it could be anyone else.
Yeah, there's no other one, no other specialist that's really, really blown me away. I mean, the only other guy you could probably make a case for is Roosevelt Nix because he blocks a punt, but I feel like it's not consistent enough. So Ryan Switzer.
Coach of the year, I'm going with James Daniel, the tight ends coach, because of how well they played.
I'm going to agree. I think Mike Munchak is on his tail, though. I think after these past two performances, Mike Munchak is about to be challenging him for that spot.
Most improved player. Who is this?
I'm going to go with James Conner. I felt like how he improved his pass protection and pass catching was huge for him. Who is your most improved player?
I'm actually going to go with James Conner, too. I originally had Alejandro Villanueva, but he was still a starter before. James Conner was a relative afterthought before this season, so he's very deserving of it. With that will wrap up part one. We'll be back for part two shortly. So we just covered the Steelers and all of their grades at the midway point of the year. And we'll be back to talk a little bit about the Steelers a little more and then the NFL as a whole. So thank you for listening to part one of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, Season 3, Episode 45, Part 2. Let's talk about some storylines for the Steelers. Can they keep their good run blocking going, the offensive line I'm talking about? They played well the last couple weeks, but they had some struggles earlier in the year. Can they keep it going?
I feel like they can. They did it against two solid defensive lines the past 2 weeks. And that tells me that they can pretty much handle other ones. I mean, they have some other tough matchups going forward. I mean, they have the Broncos with Von Miller. They have Jacksonville with Calais Campbell and all their other guys like Malik Jackson and such. But I feel like otherwise they should be good for the rest of the year. I feel like if they could handle the Bengals, they could really handle anyone. And we saw what the Ravens offensive line did to Titans, and they only allowed the Ravens one sack. I feel like this team, this unit should be good going forward in all aspects, not even just run blocking. I feel like as a whole they're going to be good going forward. What do you think?
I think what we saw from weeks 2 through 4, the big struggles, they won't happen as much going forward. Part of the rushing attack struggles came with the fact that the Steelers were down big in some games, and Randy Fichtner wasn't calling many running plays at all. The Steelers have played a couple teams in the last 2 weeks that haven't stopped the run very well, and the Steelers beat up on them, and I wouldn't expect them to have the same wild success the next 2 weeks against the Ravens and Browns, but I still think they'll play well. I think they've gotten their struggles figured out, and they'll be a more consistent run-blocking team moving forward. Who is somebody that we haven't seen much of or much good from so far this year that could emerge in the second half, a la Martavis Bryant last year, who was virtually invisible early on and became a relatively solid piece of the offense in the second half?
I'm going to go with Vince Williams. I get he had a pretty nice performance on his first game back, but I want that to continue from him because prior to that, we just weren't seeing it much from him. I want to see more sacks. I want to see him finish the year with at least 4 sacks. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. That's kind of low considering last season what he put up, but so far right now I have low expectations for him because he hasn't really been showing up. So I'm hoping that in the second half that this is going to be his half. How about for you?
I'm hoping it's Cameron Sutton. I don't have a ton of high hopes for Artie Burns to be the guy anymore. Cody Sensabaugh is just a Band-Aid at this point, and Brian Allen's a long-term possibility, but Sutton is the best equipped in my mind to make an impact at cornerback. We've seen him in limited action this year, and he's had good and bad moments. But the coaches seem to love him, at least that's what they say. He hasn't played a ton, though, but at this point, I think there's more upside with him than rolling out Sensabaugh for the rest of the year. Worst case scenario, Sutton is just a good slot guy, which means you only have one big hole on the defense, which is still bad, but you have to at least give it a shot, right? All right.
Oh, yeah.
What is the biggest issue with this defense? I think we are pretty sure what they are, but what issues with the defense are the most correctable?
Well, tackling isn't the biggest issue like it was last year, surprisingly. It hasn't actually been an issue at all, in my opinion. The big issue this year is consistent pressure on mine. Not even pressure, just getting it consistently has been an issue, and no one being consistent enough to get pressure every game. Like, Watt was the dude game 1 and then against the Falcons, but he's not always that dude. I would much rather him spread out his sacks than get these huge performances all the time. But, don't take that as me blaming him. No one else is really stepping up with Hargrave and Dupree tied for second on the team of sacks. And sacks don't mean pressure. My point is pressure, and Dupree really doesn't get pressure because that's just not who he is. He's not a very good pass rusher at the end of the day unless it comes to the Suns. Hargrave, on the other hand, I feel like has been okay at getting pressure, but he could still get better as well. But Butler needs to create some more exotic blitzes that cause more pressure. And hopefully that pressure will even lead to some more sacks. But sacks really aren't the problem at the end of the day. It's really just a lot of the quarterbacks are getting a lot of time to throw on just random plays when they shouldn't. I feel like that's been one of the bigger issues going forward. I don't know how fixable that really is. I feel like it's mostly on Keith Butler to dial up some really good blitzes to allow guys to cause this pressure, to work with what he's got. So what are your problems? What are your biggest issues with the defense, and which ones are the most fixable?
Well, there are problems on every level, starting with the line. Like you mentioned, they and the linebackers haven't been as consistent, especially when it comes to rushing the passer. The inside linebackers have been a bit better than the outside guys in my mind, but the outside guys have more standout performances. I need to see more pressure from these guys, especially on the outside. And then the defensive backfield is a mess, but less of one than it was earlier in the season. We just talked about it, the cornerback position opposite Joe Hayden. So that being the case, I think the problem that's most easily fixed is to play the defensive line. All three of the starters have played well and have played at their best at times this season. It's just a matter of coming together more consistently. I think they're all talented enough to be disruptive forces, and I think it's easier, especially in Hayward's case, for those guys to be consistently better than any other group because they have done it before, more often than the other starters of the other position groups from top to bottom. I think their improvement will help the rest of the defense in a domino effect as well. If they can fill gaps more consistently and get after the quarterback more often It'll make life easier for everybody else. So that's what I think is the most correctable problem with the defense. What are realistic expectations for the offense and defense going forward? What are their respective upsides?
For offense, there's little to no reason to not think they can score around 30 points every game because this offense truly can't get much better than the players it already has. They are probably one of the most well-rounded offenses in the league, so I'm going to hold them to high standards. I feel like there really is no cap to what they could do. Like this team, if they could just figure it all out, could be putting up 40 a game. This could be the Chiefs' offense if everyone was performing at their absolute best. Right now, the line's there, but like not everyone's there. Like Ben Roethlisberger doesn't have the deep ball yet. Like that's been part of the issue. But if they could just all get it together and all perform at the same time, this could be absolutely disgusting. For the defense, despite them trending upwards, my realistic expectation is that they give up around 23 to 27 points per game. They still aren't that good of a unit in my eyes, so I don't have super high expectations for them. I totally don't expect them to be getting many, if any, games where a team scores under 20. Maybe Jacksonville and maybe the Broncos because they're bad, but that's really it. Like this defense just isn't really good, that type of defense. It's not good enough to really hold a team to under 20 for the most part. What are your expectations for the offense and defense, and what are their upsides?
On offense, I think that we shouldn't expect anything less than 27 to 30 points a game from this unit. Yeah, they'll have their days off from time to time, but there really isn't a weakness in this offense right now. Even the tight ends have been great. Once the deep ball gets established, this offense will be truly elite. The other great thing that they can do is they can play in shootouts, or they can at least play the ball control game, as we saw against the Bengals. They're a multifaceted offense. Although I don't anticipate the red zone offense to continue to produce in the manner that it has, I think they've been very good, and they'll continue to score touchdowns at a good clip. The key for the offense is to continue to get out there faster like it did against the Falcons. They have to make sure that they don't abandon the running game quickly as they did before against the Ravens and Chiefs. This is becoming a great unit once again, and they should have no problem scoring at least 24 points a game. I think 30 is a much more likely or at least reachable number than it has been in the past. They shouldn't be far off it if they aren't there. On defense, I've come to accept the fact, like many, that this is just not a very talented unit, despite having a bunch of early draft picks on it. The coaching has improved lately to minimize some of those mistakes, but despite this, problems still remain at every level, and consistency is an issue. It's possible that this is an issue that doesn't get resolved. The last 2 weeks give me hope, and I think that 20 points a game isn't necessarily out of the question. We've seen how critical getting a lead early on for this unit is. They're much better when they're playing with the lead than they are when they're behind. The problem is, on days when the offense has a slow start or just doesn't show up, can the defense play well enough to win a game or two? I don't know if they can. I'm really not sure. And that leads us to the Steelers' final 10 games. I'll read out the schedule right now. They're hosting Cleveland this week, then they're at Baltimore, hosting Carolina for a Thursday night game, in Jacksonville for Sunday Night Football, at Denver for a 4:25 game, hosting the Los Angeles Chargers, at the Oakland Raiders on Sunday Night Football, hosting New England Patriots, at the New Orleans Saints, and then hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. So that being the case, take a second, think about it. How do you think the Steelers finish in their final 10 games? What is their record? Who do they beat? Who do they lose to?
You know, it really does look bright going forward because this might be the Steelers blinders talking, but I think the Steelers go 8-2 in their final 10 games. That's ambitious, and I even admit that, but that's including winning the next 5. I feel like, coming from me, that's bold, but really I feel like the Steelers will realistically lose to the Chargers and the Patriots, and then upset the Saints. Those 3 games, the Chargers, the Patriots, and the Saints, are the games where I feel like the Steelers have a good chance of losing. The other ones, I feel either it could go either way, or the Steelers could win it. And it's just really, it's hard for me to the Browns winning. It's hard for me to see the Browns winning next game. Then the Ravens sweeping the Steelers after that. Jacksonville winning anything other than a college game unless they trade their quarterback in this next upcoming week. Maybe the Broncos, despite being bad on offense, put up a fight because of their solid defense and pass rush. And basically, Case Keenum is their starter for good. Like after they cut Chad Kelly, but yeah, I could go on. And really, the only team you could convince me would win that I have them losing to. I'm sorry. The only team that could beat the Steelers that I have the Steelers winning is the Saints. I feel like the Saints. I feel like the Steelers could overpower them. I feel like the Saints' defense has been pretty bad, and they just traded for some more trash that we'll talk about later. But I realistically can see the Steelers going 8-2. What do you think?
I think the Steelers will go 7-3 in their final 10 games. They should take care of these 4 teams relatively easily: the Browns, Raiders, Bengals, and Panthers. They should. And I think they will also beat the Broncos and Jaguars, too. The Chargers game is a bit of a coin flip for me at this point. The Chargers have been very good, but I think the Steelers almost always beat them in Pittsburgh. I think they'll edge them out there. I can't see them beating the Patriots until they actually do it. The game in New Orleans is also tough. And then that Baltimore game is just really tough. It's a winnable game, but that looks like it's going to be the game of the year for them. So there's several games I'm not too sure about. I originally had 6-4, but the Steelers are a much better second-half team. So I think they'll come through with some more wins. So I think 7-3, finishing 10-5-1 is where I will have them this year. All right, NFL Outlook. Let's just get some awards out of the way for the rest of the NFL. Who is our midseason MVP? Mine is Patrick Mahomes. The voters seem to love quarterbacks for this award, and they have already fallen in love with Mahomes. Todd Gurley will have something to say about it, though.
So far, I mean, I hate that it's usually only quarterback dominated, but Patrick Mahomes has just been on another level. Like, I actually have to give it to Patrick Mahomes. But, yeah, so Patty Mahomes is my MVP so far.
Coach of the year, I'm actually going to go with Bill Belichick, and he's not going to win, but I'm telling you, this is not a very talented football team. This is one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL in my mind. And on offense, they're basically Tom Brady, Josh Gordon, Rob Gronkowski, and a little bit of Julian Edelman, or rather, Julian Edelman replacing Josh Gordon, and Josh Gordon's a little sprinkled in. They are not very talented, and the fact that they look like their normal selves again just speaks to Bill Belichick and his abilities as a coach is to get the team together, because it's not a very good football team. It is not. So Bill Belichick is the coach of the year at the midway point in my mind.
For me right now, it's got to be Sean McVay. The Rams are a powerhouse. McVay set this all up in 2 years. Last year they were good. This year they're even more dominant. It's insane what they did in these past 2 years, and I think he'd be back. I think he's going back to back. This team is just so impressive. It's the best team record-wise at this point. Like, I feel like McVay has it right now, and no one's really even challenging him. Maybe Andy Reid is right there because of the Chiefs really having a fire start, but I feel like McVay has this right now pretty heavily.
Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going with Todd Gurley. He's the real best running back in the league. Dynamic and multifaceted.
I'm going to go with almost a dark horse candidate. I don't know how dark horse it is, but I'm going to pick Adam Thielen. He's been insane with 7 straight 100-yard games to start the season. If he does it one more time, he breaks. He ties the record with Calvin Johnson for with 8 straight 100-yard receiving games. So right now, I'm going to pick him to win it all.
Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going with Aaron Donald. He's the best interior defensive lineman I think I've ever seen. He's the first player I've ever seen in the National Football League where if I have a game on, I am watching the defensive tackle. But that's like how impressive he is. He's so good. He is so good. I've never seen anyone like him before. He's built like a linebacker too. It's so impressive, and I think he's been amazing. He's my Defensive Player of the Year.
For me, it's Darius Leonard. The dude has been absolutely insane in his rookie year. Despite missing a game to injury, he still leads the NFL in total tackles, get this, by 12 after missing a full game. He also has 4 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, so he has my vote as of right now. Incredible rookie year out of Darius Leonard.
All right, For Offensive Rookie of the Year, I think it's pretty easy, and it's Saquon Barkley. He's the only guy that's going to contribute really more consistently than anybody else.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else really is challenging Barkley at this time. There's not really an offensive player that's close. I mean, maybe you looked at Calvin Ridley for a week because he got 3 touchdowns in one game and had 6 touchdowns, but he's since slowed down and no one's keeping up with Saquon Barkley. Barkley is a generational talent. He's been a generational talent. That's what he was great as in the draft, and he's going to win it quite easily, I think.
On defense, though, for the Rookie of the Year, I'm going with Denzel Ward. He has been better than expected, and I think the Browns' quote-unquote storybook season, where they haven't lost every game, will culminate in Ward winning this award, even if he's not actually the best defensive rookie overall.
If he was good enough for the Defensive Player of the Year, Darius Leonard is good enough for Defensive Rookie of the Year, too. I think he comes home with both. I think he's definitely getting Defensive Rookie of the Year, but I do think he gets both at this point.
Comeback Player of the Year has to be Andrew Luck. No one else, I think. Maybe Adrian Peterson, but I think it's Andrew Luck. He's the clear-cut choice.
Yeah, he's playing at a very high level, and that man has been out of football for so long. I think he wins it.
Oh man, Will would like to cast a vote for Kerryon Johnson as the Offensive Rookie of the Year. You know, I can't discount that. I forgot he was a rookie for some reason.
No, I can't put him above Saquon Barkley, unfortunately.
I need to check out his stats real quick. I know he has been very impressive the last few weeks. I know will hammer home that they need to give him the ball a little more. At least they have the last few weeks, but early on he didn't. So he's got 444 rushing yards right now. So a little bit more and a little bit more consistency, and I'll like to possibly change my vote. But in any case, let's move on to Offensive Line of the Year. I'm going with the New Orleans Saints. They've been the best in my mind. Drew Brees hasn't thrown an interception this year, too. He hasn't been under a lot of pressure either.
Yeah, what's funny is about the same time last year when we did this episode, I had the same team for almost the same reason. The New Orleans Saints are tied for the second least amount of sacks. They have allowed the least quarterback hits in the league, and they have helped the team tie for the most rushing touchdowns. While the team's rushing average isn't that great, I still feel like this is the best overall offensive line when you can consider pass blocking and run blocking.
Give me your top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now.
Well, right now, Patrick Mahomes is at the top. He is the best quarterback there is, hands down, right now. After him comes Drew Brees. You mentioned it. He hasn't even thrown an interception this year. He's been playing insane. He's been playing really good. And then after him, Jared Goff. Jared Goff has been almost a surprise. He's coming out and firing. I mean, maybe you attribute it to the good team around him, but I feel like he's playing great football. After him, Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is a legitimate MVP candidate because he's a quarterback. So he has 17 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, and this is his career year. He's having his best year to date, and he's playing very, very well. After him comes, of course, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, I actually feel like isn't doing Tom Brady-like stuff. I feel like he's still a top 5 quarterback, don't get me wrong, but like in terms of Brady, this isn't one of Brady's like best years. This is probably closer to one of Brady's not so great years. I still puts him in top 5 because that's what not so great for Brady means, but just at number 5 for me. So who are your top 5 quarterbacks this season?
Well, first, and in a class of his own, obviously, is Nathan Peterman. Nobody has played quite like he has this year, and nobody's changed the game quite like he has in his limited playing time this year. Patrick Mahomes obviously would be next. He's been fantastic in all facets this year. Even a relatively slow half against the Patriots, he still had a fantastic overall game. Drew Brees has been as consistent as they come. No interceptions and 13 touchdowns. That'll get you up there. Jared Goff has been fantastic. He's got a plethora of weapons, and he's been utilizing all of them Tom Brady has not, as you mentioned, been his usual self, but he's still been relatively impressive. And given the lack of weapons he has at his disposal, that makes it all the more impressive. And Phillip Rivers is fifth on my list, as he has had quite a good season, as you mentioned, Austin. Top 5 receivers, I'll jump right into it. Adam Thielen has been the best wide receiver in football, and I don't see how it could be any other way. He has 100-yard receiving games every game this year, and he's just been so dynamic, and I think he's been fantastic. Michael Thomas is second. He's been very good as well. He doesn't have the numbers as high as Adam Thielen does. He also, I believe, have the Saints had their bye week yet?
The Saints have had their bye week.
Okay, I thought so. So his numbers aren't quite as high as someone like Thielen. His average yards per catch is a little bit lower than you might expect, but he also has 4 touchdowns, so he's second in my mind. Third is Antonio Brown. He's not playing as well as we've typically seen the last few years, but he still has 6 touchdowns, which is only trails Tyreek Hill, and is tied with Devontae Adams for the second most in the league. DeAndre Hopkins is fourth because he has just been absolutely tearing it up at times this year, averaging 15 yards a catch. And A.J. Green is fifth because he already has 5 touchdowns and 40 catches, 611 yards. And I omitted Julio Jones because Julio Jones does not deserve to be on this list because he doesn't have a touchdown.
For my number 1, I have Michael Thomas, and it is for one reason. I don't know if everyone knows this statistic, but right now, if you look at Michael Thomas's catch rate, he has a 97% catch rate. He's on pace right now. No receiver's had it even close to that this far into the season. The second best, I think going at this point in the season was, I believe, 79.8. I believe that is the best catch rate at this point in the season, and he is at 97% with over 40 catches, I believe. He's insane when the ball comes to him, though. He's going to catch it. He's only dropped, I think, 3 balls all year. And, I don't know even know if he's dropped them. I haven't watched the Saints games all that much, all of them. But some of those just might have been misfires from Drew Brees. I don't know. It's just Michael Thomas has been playing at a high level. And he's also got a lot of touchdowns that show for it. After him is Adam Thielen, because Adam Thielen's been insane. Adam Thielen obviously has the 700 yard receiving games, and I feel like he is right there with Michael Thomas. It's hard for me to actually put Thielen underneath him, but that catch rate for me was something insane. I don't know I've ever seen that either, and it's, for me, that was above Adam Thielen's 7 100-yard receiving games. I was just super impressed with it. After Thielen comes DeAndre Hopkins, because Hopkins just makes catch after catch that are disgusting. He makes spectacular grabs, and he plays with whoever's out there. You could throw any quarterback out there, and he's going to do good because he's just that kind of receiver. After Hopkins comes Antonio Brown. I feel like Antonio Brown didn't have a great start to the year, but he's, again, trending upwards, and he has 6 touchdowns already. So, the touchdowns really help him, and that's why the guy behind him is just barely in the top 5. Julio Jones does not have a touchdown, and it's holding him back immensely because he has the yards, he has the catches, but it's just, if you're not getting touchdowns, the yards aren't as important. At the end of the day, touchdowns are the most important thing in this game. It's the game of football. You win by scoring, not by getting in the most yards. So Julio Jones is at 5, and I was very close to making it Tyreek Hill instead. I was very close because Tyreek Hill has been playing insane with Patrick Mahomes, but right now, if I were to have one more slot, it would have been Tyreek Hill. But, all right, top 5 running backs, who are they for you?
Todd Gurley is first, and that's not really a question. He's been outstanding as far as a receiver and a runner, too, and he has 11 touchdowns already, which is just insane. Melvin Gordon is second. He's been very good as well. He has 6 touchdowns, too. He's been dynamic in just about every facet of the game for the Chargers, although I must point out I'm very disappointed that he was made inactive so early last week. I'm going to bang that home as it ruined one of my days in fantasy football. So I'm salty about that. I have Kareem Hunt third right now. I have he hasn't been quite as outstanding as he was last year, but I still feel like he's been contributing just enough as a runner for me to put him up there. 5 touchdowns this year, and he's been averaging 77.4 yards a game. He's been kind of quiet, too. Fourth, I have Saquon Barkley just because of the volume he gets and how bad that offensive line is. It's not a good unit at all, and if Eli Manning can't get the ball to Odell Beckham Jr., then really Barkley's the only guy that can do anything, and he has been the only guy at times. Fifth, I have Ezekiel Elliott just because, again, of the volume. He's second in the league in rushing, and he's still averaging just under 5 yards a carry. He only has 3 touchdowns, but again, that's not a scary passing attack, so he's facing 8-man boxes a lot of the time. So Elliott is fifth in my mind. What about you?
For me, Todd Gurley is number 1 easily. It's not even close. Then number 2 comes Melvin Gordon, who's also having a really good year, along with Philip Rivers and with the Chargers. I've been a fan of Gordon for like 2 years now, though. So like this isn't new to me. 3 is Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's performance against the Bengals was decisive. Kareem Hunt was out for blood. And Kareem Hunt, literally in that one game, was boosted himself up to 3 from 4. Because I originally had Saquon Barkley above him. Now I have Saquon Barkley behind him. And that's not saying anything about Barkley. I feel like Barkley's been great. He's definitely living up to the expectation and hype so far. So I have him at number 4. But at number 5, I actually have James Conner. I feel like James Conner has just been he's got 7 touchdowns on the year. And maybe that's just those blinders talking, but I feel like Zeke has had games where he's just been like completely shut out and shut down. Same with like David Johnson. I honestly, after the top 4, it was almost kind of hard to pick because like all the guys that go that like they're all like I don't want to call them that because I feel like James Conner is great. I feel like Ezekiel Elliott's great. It's just like hard to distinguish them and who's better. And I went with James Conner there. But moving on to top 5 tight ends in the NFL this year. Who do you got?
I am going with Zach Ertz first because he has more yards and catches than any other tight end in the league. He has only 2 touchdowns, but a significant amount of time came with Nick Foles at quarterback. I think he's been very good. Travis Kelce, I have second. He's been the most dynamic tight end as far as overall just ability from the outside. I think he's been a very good receiver. George Kittle has been a surprising asset for the San Francisco 49ers, even with C.J. Beathard at quarterback. His production has not waned much. Rob Gronkowski, I have fourth, and yes, his numbers are a bit down. He's dealing with injuries, but for most of the early part of this season, he was the only guy on offense that Tom Brady trusted throwing the football, and he still produced a little bit. So even though his numbers are down, I think Gronkowski is the 4th best tight end. And finally, 5th, I have Jared Cook. With that dumpster fire of a team, he's still producing pretty good numbers. Just a solid option. He seems to never go away. I'm going with Jared Cook as the 5th best tight end.
Yeah, he'll probably be traded in the next week. But number 1 for me is Travis Kelce. I feel like he's done really good so far with Patrick Mahomes, and maybe that's more speaking on how well Patrick Mahomes is doing, but I've been happy with Travis Kelce so far. Zach Ertz comes at number 2, and the only reason I didn't put him at number 1 is because I don't like Zach Ertz's his blocking. He's not a very good blocking tight end. He's elite in terms of pass catching, but like his pass blocking and blocking in general just isn't that good. At number 3, though, George Kittle, a great blocker coming out of college, and he's been lighting up the stat sheet with catches and stuff, and I've been very happy with him this year. Number 4, bringing back up the dumpster fire, Jared Cook comes in at number 4 because he had a hot start. He's been slowing down lately, and he'll probably end up off this list by the end of the year, but for now he's on it. And number 5 was a surprise one for me. Eric Ebron. He wasn't even the starter coming out of the season, but Jack Doyle getting hurt allowed him to be used more than ever, and he leads tight ends in touchdowns with 6, and I've been pretty impressed with him. I've actually watched, I think, the past 2 cold schemes now, and he gets open a lot. I know Lions fans hated him by the end of it. They were booing him because he had stone hands, but his hands seem to have improved. I've seen him now drop balls, though, still with Indianapolis, but like they're better than what I remember when he was a Lion, and he absolutely like dropped every single thing that came his way, and he's gotten into the top 5. And I think maybe it's unfair to Rob Gronkowski because especially with the reports, like people are coming out and saying he's in pain, like he's in a lot of pain, and he's playing through it because he has incentives. He has incentives that he's probably not going to reach because he's probably not going to play this upcoming game, but he's been playing through a bunch of injuries, I think, according to his agent, and just going with it anyway. But for now, I still have Eric. Yeah, that didn't factor into my grading, so I have Eric Ebron at number 5.
All right, top 5 defenses. I'll list them. Number 1 I have is the Ravens. They're the best statistically all around. They get turnovers, they get sacks, they get pressure, and they don't give up yards or touchdowns. So the Ravens are number 1. The Bears are number 2. They aren't as good in overall yards and points, but they get a lot of sacks and they force turnovers. Cleveland Browns are 3rd. They're similar to the Bears. They have the most turnovers in the league. The Steelers played a big part in that by turning the ball over 6 times in week 1, so I'm not as sold on the Browns' defense as everyone else is, but it's still a good unit. The Dallas Cowboys are sneaky good. A couple of years ago, it was all about their offense and not their defense. Now the defense has become a rock-solid unit. And last, I have the Rams. Even though they haven't been statistically dominant, they have the personnel to be a great unit. So they are 5th. Who are your top 5 defenses?
My top 5 is very similar to yours for all the same reasons. Number 1 is the Ravens, most sacks, least points per game given up, least yards per game given up, and they played the Saints, the Steelers, and the Bengals this year, which are all top 10 offenses when they verse them. So the Ravens are number 1. Then number 2 comes Chicago Bears. They have a lot of sacks on the year. I mean, they had their bye week, so when it gets towards the end of the year, it's going to actually even look better because before the bye week, they were leading in sacks, but they had a really early one. But they have they're tied for the most interceptions at 11, and they're tied for defensive touchdowns with 2, and they have the second most forced fumbles of any team. So they're number 2 for me. Number 3 is the Cleveland Browns. They had the most passes defense, tied for the most interceptions at 11. They're tied for the third most forced fumbles. So I think they've been a sneaky good unit. They might have gotten worse because until Joe Schobert comes back at least, because they lost Schobert for at least a week or 2. But they should get better when he gets back. 4 is the Rams. They got Aaron Donald, who has 8 sacks like a monster, and the defense has been playing well together. I feel like like you said, they have the pieces to be great. And then number 5, I also have the Cowboys. They have been quietly pretty good. Like, I feel like they don't really talk about it, but I think that one of the biggest moves they had this offseason was changing. His name is not. I had his name. I lost it. Do you know the name of the safety that turned cornerback this year for them? That came out of the draft as a cornerback, and they decided to make him a safety anyway.
No. Which team is this? The
Cowboys.
The Cowboys?
It's Jones. It's something Jones. His first name is escaping me. Oh, it's going to piss me off.
Just move on. Look it up and come back to it.
Yep, we'll get back to that. It's going to piss me off, but they switched him back to cornerback, which is what he should have been coming out of college. And he's excelled. He's been graded the number 1 cornerback by Pro Football Focus this season, and it's worked out amazingly for him. And I can't remember his damn name. But, yeah, that's the top 5 defenses for me.
Super Bowl 53 will feature the Rams and the Patriots, and the Rams are going to win Super Bowl 53. What about you, Austin? Who is your midseason pick for the Super Bowl?
For my prediction right now, it's the Rams playing the Chiefs. Even though the Chiefs lost to the Patriots, I think that they can beat them on the second run through. And then I think the Chiefs win it all. I think that Patty Mahomes and Kareem Hunt lead them to a Super Bowl, even though their defense is questionable. But they got Eric Berry eventually coming back, hopefully. I mean, we don't know when he's coming back, but hopefully it's soon. That should help their defense immensely.
A lot of NFL news to get to. Linebacker Quan Alexander from the Buccaneers tore his ACL and he's out for the year. You have some thoughts on him?
This is interesting to watch because while John Bostic has been very good, Quan Alexander is elite and he's on a contract year and has now torn his ACL before getting a contract done with the Buccaneers. There might be a chance he's available, and it might be worth it, even though he's now torn his ACL, which is not a very good injury. It's hard to bounce back from. But he's an elite inside linebacker. The Steelers want to grab him with all the cap room they're going to have next year from getting rid of Bell. So that's something to look out for.
Marshawn Lynch has been placed on injured reserve, most likely ending his season with the state of the Raiders right now, and it could be the end of his career. Is Marshawn Lynch a Hall of Famer?
I do not believe he's a Hall of Famer, but I do think he's actually going to come back. They think John Gruden said think he's going to return Christmas Day after the 8 weeks has passed. They want to let him return, but I do not think he's a Hall of Famer. If I'm being honest with you, what do you think?
John Gruden says many things, and many things he says are horse manure. I think he will. I don't necessarily believe that he should. He's a very good football player, but I don't know if he's one of the best of all time. But I think he will make it in someday. Dolphins wide receiver Albert Wilson has also been placed on IR. And do you have any thoughts, comments, concerns?
Nah, he was just having a career year thus far, but still he's not very, very relevant.
Chad Kelly was arrested, the Denver Broncos backup quarterback, and released by the Broncos. So many were calling for him to take over the starting job from Case Keenum, and now he gone. What are your thoughts?
How are you so stupid? He was so close to being the starter. Fans have had enough for a while, but he was basically on the edge of being a starter very, very soon, and now he's cut. Now he is not on the Broncos and not on the team. So, I mean, how do you get in trouble for trespassing? Where were you trespassing? And apparently other things arose, like he got in a fight at Von Miller's party or something. He's just stupid. Young and stupid.
Questions about his character were something I highlighted in the pre-draft process 2 years ago. This is not that surprising to hear, to be honest with you. Eagles defensive lineman Derek Barnett, one of my favorite pre-draft prospects 2 years ago, has been placed on injured reserve ending his season. And now let's get into the trade talks. Let's start with Patrick Peterson. Originally, reports came out that he had requested a trade. Several teams were reportedly interested. Then the Cardinals came out and said that they were not trading him. And then he said that he was committed to the team anyways after meeting with the owners and executives who, quote-unquote, convinced him that they were trying to win, which I don't know what that included, whether it was laughing gas or chloroform. I don't know. I don't know how they could have managed to convince him that, but whatever. The Eagles and Patriots were two teams that were inquiring about him. What were your thoughts on Patrick Peterson's possible trade?
I wanted him so bad. I wanted him so bad. I knew the price was too high, but I wanted the Steelers to just say, hey, we'll give you a first and the Raiders fifth. The Raiders sixth for it, or even go as far as say, all right, we'll give you our first and fourth for him. But they didn't want to trade him. Patrick Peterson didn't even want to be a Steeler. His ideal place was the Saints, and then the teams that were looking for him were Kansas City, Eagles, and the Patriots. And I mean, it's kind of sad that he's on such a bad team. And like you said, I don't know what drugs they handed Patrick Peterson. They really handed him a drink and said, hey, just drink this first, man. You need to cool off. And it was full of every drug you could imagine. And then they were like, yeah, we're trying to win. The Cardinals are a good team. Stay. And he was like, you know what? You guys are right. I have no idea what happened. I'm shocked that he changed his mind about it.
I think what just happened is the team told him they're not trading him, so get used to it. Another couple trade options to talk about. The Giants are selling. Tank mode activated. They traded Eli Apple somehow to the Saints for a 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick in 2019, and also traded Damon Harrison to the Lions for just a 5th-round pick. You explain that to me because that makes absolutely no sense to me. The Lions got a steal.
Neither of these make sense to me. One is really good for the Giants. The other is really bad for the Giants. When I found out that Eli Apple was being traded, I did not yet know what picks were going. I was talking with a Giants fan friend told me, and I was like, I guess you guys are getting like a conditional 6th or something. And then it broke that they got a 4th and a 7th for it. I was shocked. I was just confused. I was like, because Eli Apple is one of my least favorite players in the league. And here's why. He is bad, and he doesn't get the criticism he deserves. You see OBJ getting called, like, emotional and like, a little wuss on the sideline. Eli Apple is bad, and he's a little wuss on the sideline. Like, Eli Apple was literally trying to fight a coach, like, 2 weeks ago, and no one talks about it because he's not good, because he's garbage. He's not OBJ. He's not putting up big numbers. He's not carrying a team. He's not doing great things as a quarterback. He's just being garbage and then acting like garbage. I'm not a fan of his at all. I mean, he has upside as a young 23-year-old, but he's such a locker room cancer. He's bad for the locker room, and then he's just garbage. I don't understand what the Saints saw. Apparently, the Saints have like a fetish for Ohio State defensive backs because this is now their 4th Ohio State defensive back on their roster, and apparently they wanted him so bad that they offered a 4th and a 7th when they're already out of their 1st and 3rd round picks in this draft. Oh, okay, all right. I mean, the 7th is in 2019, but all right. And then for the other move for the Giants, Damone Harrison, how does he only go for a 5th round pick? That shocks me. Again, he should have gone for a 4th and a 7th, if anything. I mean, I think that he's worth a 4th, and I think that the Lions got a steal getting him for a 5th. Like, it's just, I have no idea how it worked out that way. It's not even like the Lions are at the bottom. Like, if this was the other way around, where that 5th round pick was at the beginning of the round because it's the Giants pick, okay, it makes a little bit more sense. But, like, this is, like, a mid-round, 5th round. So, like, it's not even worth it. He's, like, I get he's older, but he's still got 2 years on his contract, and he's still the best run stopper in the league. He's literally always been so efficient at that. Like, I can't believe that the Lions just stole them from him. And this is really good for the Lions because the Lions, up until this point, have been a really bad rush defense team. And this will help them immensely. This is an immediate fix-up that might actually help them a lot in their division. So this is really good for the Lions. What do you think about these trades?
Well, starting with Harrison, Will had been talking to me a lot about him. He's a former All-Pro, by the way. I don't know many All-Pros that are just run stoppers. They don't really exist anymore. So that should tell you something about how good this guy is. Even if he's 29 years old, even if his best years are behind him, he's a good player, and he's going to help that team immensely. I don't know how the Giants managed to do something like that and then trade Eli Apple for what they traded for him for. But hey, good for them. I think Eli Apple is just a waste of a space in the locker room. I think Landon Collins or Janoris Jenkins, I can't remember, called him a cancer in the locker room just last year. Do you remember that?
I think it was Landon Collins, but yeah, I actually do remember that, and it's because he is a cancer in the locker room and he's trash.
Speaking of Janoris Jenkins, because I mentioned him, he is someone that's in line to be traded. Several teams have inquired, apparently including the Steelers. What are your thoughts on Janoris Jenkins?
I don't like Janoris Jenkins either. I think, at least unlike Eli Apple, Janoris Jenkins at one point was good. I think he's past that. I don't think he is good anymore. And I think that he complains a lot and he does a lot of that sideline shenanigans. The whole Giants as a team just have a lot of sideline issues and locker room issues. He's not a guy I would want the Steelers to go after personally, especially since I think he's past the prime. But I mean, if the Giants were like, we'll take a 6th-round pick for him, I guess. But, even then, there arises the problem of, he's being paid so much. The Steelers would have to make moves to be able to allow him on the roster, or the Giants have to eat some of his money so the Steelers can get him. So, like, I really hope that's not the move that the Steelers are planning to make.
Agreed. Amari Cooper, surprisingly enough, was traded to the Cowboys from the Raiders for a first-round pick. Has Jerry Jones lost his mind, or has he, continued to? He lost his mind a lot. Did he lose his mind a long time ago?
I think he lost his mind a long time ago, but the Raiders continue to play Madden as they just throw their guy into a little loading screen where it shows you all the possible trade offers. And the Cowboys were the team that lost on the wheel, that decided to give up so much. I find that this is controversial. A lot of Cowboys, I literally talked to a Cowboys fan and he was happy and I was a little confused. And then I realized that it's 50-50 on this. People are either yeah, this is bad for the Cowboys, or they're either oh no, yeah, this is terrible. I'm on the terrible side. I'm on that Amari Cooper has been not that great since getting into the league. He has got a drop problem after all. I mean, sure, I feel like we know what he is by now, and he's still very young. But he's going to be expensive in the next year. Cowboys have to either decide to pick up his fifth-year option or not, and it's going to be a heavy one. It's going to be hefty. I don't think Amari Cooper is worth that. He's okay, but not very good, not first-round pick good, that's for sure. And especially with how high the Cowboys pick was, I believe it was, if the season ended right now, it'd be pick 17. But I'm just not a fan. I'm really not. I think with a first-round pick, you could have gotten someone better. I actually can't throw out a recommendation right now, but I think that the most a team should have offered for Amari was a late second, and if you had an early second, you go to the Raiders and say, listen, we'll give you a third and a sixth, a conditional sixth, at that. So I wouldn't be. It's not a trade that I like for the Cowboys, but I mean, some people like it. What do you think about it?
I think it's a terrible trade because the Cowboys could have kept that pick and they could have picked one of the many good receivers that are coming out in the draft this year. And I don't know about Cooper. Since 2015, you know who has more receiving yards than he does? Adam Humphries. Do you know who that is?
I'm sorry. You actually cut out right when you said it. Who said that?
Adam Humphries.
Oh, really? The Buccaneer?
Yeah. That's what I heard on Pro Football Talk this morning.
Ouch. That is pretty rough.
Or maybe it's just the last 2 years. In fact, I think it is just the last 2 years. Yeah, it's just the last 2 years. The last 2 years, he has more receiving yards than Amari Cooper. I wouldn't give up a first-round pick for him, so I think it's a bad deal. I think it's not a good deal at all, and I hope he turns it around, but I'm not super confident in that. So, yeah. That'll wrap up this very long edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the Steelers halfway point? All right.
I just really hope that there's more trades this week to talk about. It's most exciting. Actually, there is one more thing I want to say. There's one trade idea that I saw floating around, not for the Steelers, but I think it would work out really well. That the Jaguars send Calais Campbell and a second-round pick to the Saints for Teddy Bridgewater, and I feel like that would be a hell of a trade to save the Jaguars' season, because I thought that the Jaguars should have been the team that got Teddy Bridgewater. I thought this is really funny because when Teddy Bridgewater entered the draft, I mocked him to the Jaguars, and then when he was available via trade for the Jets, I thought the Jaguars should have got him, and they didn't. And then now it's just now I'm looking at it, just you need to go get Teddy Bridgewater right now. And the Saints, the way the Saints can improve right now to make them a win-now team is to get another pass rusher. And Calais Campbell has actually been having a low year so far, but I feel like he could turn it up, and I feel like that'd be a good trade for both at the end of the day. Maybe the Jaguars offer a third with Calais Campbell instead of a second, but yeah, something I've been thinking about.
You heard it here first. So, as always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a great night.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.